welcome you to this 41st edition of Thursday Musings. Next slide, please. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our chairperson of the program, Professor Tufan Pati sir. He is from Cuttack, National Advisory Board member of IAPP, Chairman Membership Subcommittee of IPS, Life Fellow, IIUPM and UK chapter, organized ANSIPS twice, Private Psychiatry Conference, Industrial Psychiatry, multiple conferences. He has exceptional organizational skills and he's also organizing the seminar.
Can we brief also?
Yeah. Sir, many new people are there today, so I thought. Yeah. So now I'll brief, and so he is well known to all the people in psychiatry circles. He is winner of Madhu Swabhiman 4 Avenue Service Award with multiple. He's associated with multiple social organizations. Sir, welcome and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Alim, for an elaborate introduction. And I take this privilege to welcome all the participants in this webinar who are to join our show, and welcome Dr. Seshadri with a great gratitude and respect. With us, we have got Dr. Amrit Patjoshi, who is the moderator and he is the organizer since the outset of this Thursday Musings. He is a psychotherapist and wellness consultant. He is professor of psychiatry in High Tech Medical College, and he is consultant in Amari Hospital and Healing Touch Clinic. He is direct council member of Indian Psychiatric Society, and he is the editor of Odisha Journal of Psychiatry, which is indexed. And he has been the chief coordinator of UNICEF WHO IPS Initiative on Telemedicine on Psychosocial Management during COVID-19. And we have with us Dr. Alim Siddiqui, who has been introducing me, Nawab from Lucknow, the neuropsychiatrist, psychotherapist, and wellness consultant. He is the professor and chief consultant neuropsychiatrist. He is director of Healthy Minds Neuropsychiatry Behavioral Sciences Center. He is the visiting professor of psychiatry, ERAS Lucknow Medical College Hospital, Lucknow, and GSBM Medical College, Kanpur. He is the past director council member of IPS, just completed his tenure. He is guest faculty in Amity University, Lucknow, and he is the finance secretary of IMA Lucknow branch and IAPP UP plus UK chapter. Ali, welcome. And we have to introduce the two chairpersons, the ever dynamic, vibrant Dr. Sanjay Gupta from Banaras, Senior Professor of Psychiatry, Department of Psychiatry, Institute of Medical Sciences, Banaras, Indian University, Varanasi. He has been the coordinator of BHA Stress Management and Counseling Center. He is the zonal representative of IPS Central Judge. Welcome, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. And with us, we have got young, smart Dr. Shobit Garg from Dehradun. He is an alumnus of JSS Medical College, Mysore as MBBS, and he has done MD DPM in CIP Ranchi. He is Associate Professor of Psychiatry, Sri Guru Ram Rai Institute of Medical and Health Sciences, Patel Nagar, Dehradun, Uttarakhand. He has a number of presentations and publications to his credit. Welcome, Dr. Shobit. Will be rewarded by having the two chairpersons with us. And over to the chairpersons. Now, the webinar belongs to the chairpersons. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Just to set the motion, I would like to thank at the outset Dr. Tufan Pati sir for introducing me and my beloved seniors, Dr. Alim and Dr. Amrit sir, to give an opportunity to chair the session among such an august gathering and such an important, pertinent subject. I would like to bring to delegates' notice that Spanish flu in 1918 was affected around 500 million population, around 1/3 of the population, and it was a result of which 50 million people were killed. And unfortunately, we have reached 1/3 of the milestone. Spanish flu, as we all know, came in 3 waves, and second wave was the most vigorous as in current times. It did stricken a lot of panic at default and created mass hysteria and xenophobia, to say the least. Now, last year gave us a prevalent fear of being labeled, stigma, in quarantine, isolation. But this second wave has probably gifted us the fear of lack of beds, doctors, oxygen, and medication lack. So, it is in society, we have differing tolerance and certainty levels. So without much ado, I would like to request my senior co-chair to introduce the speaker and commence the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shobit. Thank you, Dr. Tofan Pati, the chairman. Thank you, Dr. Aleem, Dr. Amrit Patel Joshi. I'm especially thankful to Dr. Tofan Pati for asking me to chair this particular 41st edition of the Thursday Musings, because we have a phenomenal topic which is of utmost importance for today. And today, you'd say there's a whole lot of confusion. And if I say, you know, can we find one word that will fit today's scenario? Well, it's very difficult. But then maybe if we tried it, the one word that will fit in is uncertainty. And this uncertainty is all about, you know, becoming positive, or finding a doctor, finding a bed, finding oxygen, finding injections, finding ventilator support. You know, you mentioned, you think of it, everything is uncertain. So much, there's so many beds and so many vaccinations are being tried all over. The government is trying its very best. But among the masses, there is a phenomenal degree of uncertainty. And today I'd like to introduce to all of you the distinguished members and the distinguished guests who have joined this 41st edition of Thursday Musings. I'd like to introduce Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. He will be speaking on intolerance of uncertainty. And he's a master on that. He's been working on that since last year. He has a whole lot of ideas, and I'm quite sure we'd love to listen to him. It would be a very great privilege to listen to his thoughts. Dr. Shekhar Seshadri does not need any introduction, but for formality's sake, he's a graduate of Maulana Azad Medical College, Delhi. He's a postgraduate from NIMHANS, Bangalore. Currently, he's a senior professor at the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and he's also the Dean of Behavioral Sciences at NIMHANS, Bangalore. Besides working with child and adolescent mental health, including developmental disabilities, he's actively involved in the areas of gender and sexualities, violence, trauma, and abuse, children in difficult circumstances, juvenile justice, experiential methodologies, school programs, teacher training and life skills education, community and school mental health program, forum theater, qualitative research. I mean, you mention it, and he is into it. So without wasting any further time, I'm quite sure you're very eager to listen to Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. Very warm welcome to you, Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. Thank you for joining us on the 41st edition. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay, and thank you very much, Shobit. And Tofan sir, Amrit, as always, Janab Aleem, all good friends. सबसे पहले साथियों मैं दो तीन चीजें कहना चाहता हूं. I'd like to say 2 or 3 things before I get down to the substance of what I want to share with you. In March of this year, it was exactly 1 year that the pandemic kind of hit and the lockdown started. As Shobit pointed out, 100 plus years ago, we have some traces of history. I want to draw to your attention that when the first wave came, it was the elderly with comorbidities who were our source of concern. And what has happened in the second wave is healthy adults are being affected and succumbing. Amidst the gamut and list of contexts in which uncertainties occur, which Dr. Sanjay Gupta has alluded to comprehensively in his introductory remarks. This is not to sound as any foretelling of a voice of doom, but public health dictates that the third wave will hit in October and November, and no prices for guessing who's going to be affected, because the virus has to find a susceptible host. And who are they going to be, friends? They're going to be children, unvaccinated, because the 0 to 18 vaccine is still under trial. No regulatory body will allow for. Therefore, the best public health approach is common sense, and the best vaccine is a mask. Having said this, I want to make two other opening remarks. One is that I'm acutely aware that many of our fraternity have been personally affected by the pandemic. Their family members have been affected. Many of our fraternity have been hospitalized. Many of them have needed respiratory assistance and ICU care. Many of them have touched the brink and come back. Many of us have lost family members. And this saga is going to continue amidst all the struggles that Sanjay Gupta referred to. I want to take a moment to basically recognize the distress and pain that many of us have experienced, including the pain of loss and grief, and just take a moment's silence to share with you all that we have endured, all that we have suffered, and all that we have lost. Thank you very much. The second is not exactly a disclaimer. As Dr. Vishal points out in chat, that some of these predictions sound scary, but they are an important reminder. And therefore, whatever I wish to say today is in no way intended to trivialize the reality of the experiences that many of you have endured and the reality of the assistance that you have to provide to many of your clients who have endured similar experiences and challenges there. So when I will speak of some of the fundamentals of intolerance of anxiety and refer to scripts and scriptures that go back to 3,000, 4,000 years, which have philosophical origins, this is in no way to intellectualize this debate and in no way intended to trivialize the reality of the pain. It is only intended to provide a framework of reference for us to navigate this crisis that we are in. And this pandemic is now a humanitarian crisis. It is not just an ordinary pandemic anymore. It's a complex humanitarian crisis, and it's an emergency. As has again been pointed out in chat, yes, the feeling of grief is very painful for other family members. So we are in a crisis. And I'll be mentioning a lot of this only as a method to provide a scaffolding to ride the second wave, navigate the third, perhaps even the fourth and fifth, till the virus and its mutations lose their potency. More and more people get vaccinated, we reach herd immunity. And if history is any indication, that's likely to take perhaps the next 2 or 3 years. And that's the time frame. So please mark, the narrative has changed. The narrative 1 year ago was, ye kitne din chalega? How long will this go on? The narrative now is, this is going to go on for very long, isn't it? The narrative 1 year ago was, when will this end? Ye kab khatm hoga? The narrative now is, ye jald khatm nahi hone wala hai na. So, ecology, our world has changed. Ecologies have changed. One last thing before I go to slide share. If you ask any human being, how far in the future have you planned and predicted for yourself? COVID notwithstanding, somebody may have told you, I have plans for the next 3 years. I have completed my master's. I have the resource money for a startup, and I'll see how it goes. Somebody may say, I have planned for 10 years because I have got scholarship in aid to do my PhD with the assurance that I'll be taken into a project. But if you ask a stockbroker, he will say 2 minutes. Because if I make a bad investment, my world can come crumbling in 2 minutes. I do not make a prediction beyond 2 minutes. The truth, my friends, is no matter how traffic conscious and law abiding you are, you're always subject to someone else's error of judgment. Does that mean we continue to live in fear? Is there a possibility if we cross the road that a vehicle will come and hit us? Yes, there is a possibility. Does that mean we stop crossing the road? No, we don't. We look to the left, we look to the right, we gauge and we cross. As Shahbaz points out in chat, that people are seen calm about the death of near ones in the house, like a mother, a relative. And Shahbaz has someone who works on the phone and was treating for the last 5 days and said very casually, ki, Ma chal basi, sir, as he anxiously inquired about his phone. It's a strange emotional reaction, and we all have this kind of emotional reaction that as we try to navigate and make sense that. And which is why Vishal points out that we have to accept that unpredictability is part of life despite all scientific achievements of mankind. Yes, there are structural equation models, mathematical predictions, and I'm going to be alluding to all of that as we go into the substance of what I want to share with you, all 300 of you. Yes, Ishwaran, it's a probabilistic world, and we have to realistically accept risks. So friends, the need for certainty. If you have anxiety or OCD, let's say, it's very common to have an unrealistic need for certainty, even in situations where certainty is not possible. And this need for certainty can lead to seeking excessive reassurance. और जब हम uncertainty की बात करते हैं, हम किसी परिस्थिति से जूझ रहे हैं. We are dealing with a reality. Are we really dealing with a reality, or are we dealing with possibility? अब OCD में क्या होता है? In OCD, it is not that you're absolutely certain that something will happen. It is the possibility that something will happen that keeps on circling in your mind. मंडराता रहता है आपके ज़हन में. So, where the uncertainty of this pandemic is concerned and our own navigation through this, what are the experiences that are in the realm of reality? And look at what Sanjay ji pointed out. जब अपने पे बीतती है, beds are not available, कहाँ oxygen है, कहाँ नहीं है, ventilator मिलेगा कि नहीं. And for some, it is in the realm of possibility. We are still okay. We're not infected. Our family is okay. But is there a likelihood that it will happen? Let me take you back many thousands of years. The sophists thought vertically. In fact, they started with certainty. They never started with uncertainty. And they built their case on top of it. Socrates, on the other hand, he thought horizontally. He said, हम लोग शुरू करते हैं मुमकिनात से, संभावनाओं से, ऐसी चीजें जिसके बारे में भविष्यवाणी कर नहीं सकते हैं, with uncertainty, and gradually whittling down all possible ideas to arrive at the truth. So there's a vast landscape of ideas out there. In our responsibility to unearth the falsehoods and discard them. So this is the situation with COVID. We start with the uncertainty. Will I get the infection? Do I have comorbidity? Have I been vaccinated? Have I got the second dose? Is this a mutant virus? Will my vaccination actually protect me from the mutations? What if I need hospitalization? What if my PO2 level falls down? Which is the hospital nearest to me? Can I advance book a bed? But as we build our networks, as we build our information sources, we arrive at a certain list of possibilities where we make arrangements for the kind of contingencies that. And no matter the extent to which you do it, there will always be that small element that is unpredictable. And that's what we have to learn how to live with. And there's a way to do that. And this is exactly what Bertrand Russell says. He says that the value of philosophy lies in its uncertainty. अब दिक्कत क्या है जब हम लोग सर्टेनिटी को कैटेगरीज में डालते हैं कि ऐसा है, यहां मिलेगा, ये दोस्त मेरी मदद करेगा, that you've categorized that. But that's not where the value of science lies. The value of science lies in the certainty that it provides, perhaps of a good cure, of good weather. On mathematical predictions, people do. But could people predict that Cyclone Amphan was going to hit West Bengal? Could people predict that the second wave would come down? Yes, it was predicted. And the third wave is also predicted. And that's where the value of science is. That I see that Dr. Apur Srivastava has already raised a hand. I don't know, Alim, whether that's a mistake or whether he has something to say. Perhaps we'll wait till the end. But to look at the philosophy of uncertainty, and if you look at what Briggs said much before COVID came, ये कहते हैं कि ये probability वाली जो बात होती है, the mathematical models, the prediction models in public health and epidemiology and statistics. Now, the approach is Aristotelian, it's not Socratic. और वो क्या कहते हैं कि सत्य है, truth exists. We can know it, but not always. So uncertainty is in our minds. It is not in objects. The uncertainty is not in the virus. The virus will mutate. The virus will find susceptible hosts. And they are going to be children in the third wave. But we also know that for children, the symptoms are going to be more GI symptoms rather than respiratory. And the trend is already shown here. And sometimes we can measure it, and there are good ways and bad ways to do it. And this brings me to the whole issue of the wisdom of uncertainty. कि धर्म का सत्य निवास जो है, the true home of dharma, न यहाँ है न वहाँ है. Again, much before COVID, बुद्धिस्ट रिव्यू में हम गौतम जी की जब बात करते हैं, when his search for enlightenment began, when he left home, we are modern people, we travel so easily. Now we may not appreciate the weight of this decision in his time. We're talking, friends, of 6th century BC, when most people never even ventured further than a few miles from their birthplace. आपको आश्चर्य होगा, नालंदा में पढ़ने के लिए उस जमाने में लोग जब आते थे, when people came to the university in Nalanda, they walked for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years to study for 6 years and then walk back for another 5 years. This was the kind of dharma that existed then. So liminality goes against the grain. The more uncertain our lives become in response to events beyond our control, the more we want to plant our field solidly in one place. So where does that leave risk takers? और कोविड से पहले लोग माउंट एवरेस्ट क्यों चढ़ते हैं, रेसिंग कार क्यों चलाते हैं, अंडर वाटर डीप सी डाइविंग क्यों करते हैं? दिमाग खराब है क्या आपका? You know that you will die if there's an avalanche or you have frostbite or altitude sickness. So there are different kinds of people. There are some, and this is not just about an adrenaline rush or pathology. I'm not pathologizing risk takers. I'm just saying that there are many ways of being and existing, and the choice is with you. This does not mean, risk-taking does not mean in the current pandemic that you don't sanitize, you don't maintain a distance, you don't wear a mask, and you go around, all over. And that's not what I'm saying. But, it's a balance between these safety precautions, but dealing with your uncertainty in a way that you're not paralyzed by the kind of uncertainty that the pandemic brings. So if you look at what the Royal Society said, they said that perceived uncertainty or personal uncertainty are associated with numerous psychological responses. And at the very least, these responses are unhelpful and they are counterproductive because they are a bias against creativity when it is needed most. And it's a threat to cooperation. And worst of all, there is a propensity towards violence, either self-inflicted or otherwise that. Ali, would you please note that I think Ramesh Mohanbhai has also raised his hand. Perhaps they have questions or things to contribute. If you could register that and take it when you curate the session after my presentation is over.
Sure, sir.
Thank you. So one request, please don't raise your hands or post queries now. Let sir finish, then we can take questions and queries. It's a request to everybody. It's distracting and stopping the flow actually. So please.
So the presence of scientific uncertainty, कि कितने दिन चलेगा, mutations कितनी होंगी, will the vaccine work or not? The Lancet report says that antibody titers will be higher if you take the dosage 6 to 8 weeks, even 12 weeks after the first dose. But all of us took it after 4 weeks now. So the presence of scientific uncertainty does not just reveal a lack of knowledge, but in many cases, it's a mathematical expression of the knowledge that we have. So let's understand this difference. It's not a lack of knowledge. Now, friends, look at the variety of uncertainty. This is not just about COVID. Rational argumentation against uncertainty, a taxonomy and treatment of uncertainty for ecology and conservation biology, how not to theorize about the language of subjective uncertainty, uncertain science, uncertain world, uncertainty in economics, varieties of uncertainty monitoring, decision-making under great uncertainty, the politics of uncertainty and conceptions of science, responsibly managing uncertainty in clinical ethics, decisions under imperfect knowledge. And a lot of these, we are talking about not just the COVID. This is 1996. And Socrates and Buddha was several thousand, and Buddha was like 6th century BC. So to come back to the core construct, कि ये है क्या? What is intolerance of uncertainty? And this is the classical Boswell et al. Definition. And their contention is that it's a common factor in all kinds of emotional problems, whether it's anxiety or whether it's. And Boswell et al. Say that it is a characteristic predominantly. Ma'am, I'm in a session. I'll call you back. Is predominantly associated with generalized anxiety or OCD, but it's probably a shared element, not necessarily of disorders, but of emotional states. So the question is, ye hai kya? Is it only anxiety or is it a shared element? And the answer is, it can be observed across problem areas in transdiagnostic treatment, and in the current pandemic context, is not just about disorder and treatment, it's about our lives. So the unified protocol for transdiagnostic treatment states that what we need to do is really look at restructuring our appraisals. और हम किस खबर का इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं? And how do we source information? How do we process it? And how do we use it to lead our daily lives and to plan for the month, the week, the next month? You know, if there's a lockdown, how do we plan for that in a manner that, you know, the panic comes down? So this is not just about anxiety, but it's about any problem area in our life which has strong emotional components. Therefore, conceptually, intolerance of uncertainty is well suited to address a shared feature because the focus is on commonly employed experiential control strategies. What is the structure of our worry? What is the structure of our rituals? Hamari safety signals kya hai? How do we appraise situations? How do we avoid situations? What are the kind of things that trigger experiences of uncertainty in us? And if we recognize this, then it becomes easy to navigate the second wave then. So, individuals high in intolerance of uncertainty find situations that are uncertain, threatening, upsetting, undesirable, regardless of the actual probability of a negative event to occur. सुना है कि वैक्सीनेशन होने के बावजूद भी इन्फेक्शन होने के चांसेस हैं. माइल्ड सिम्टम्स होगा कहते हैं, बट I have mild comorbidity. What if it is not mild? So, the extent to which you look at possibility, probability is actually related, as Dugas points out, कि ये 4 factors जो हैं that contribute to the development and maintenance of worry. Intolerance of uncertainty, our beliefs about worry, a negative problem orientation, and cognitive avoidance. Very simply stated, what this means, just an example that, you know, this was done in the youth, but, you know, one can generalize from this. that negative problem orientation mediates the path from intolerance of uncertainty to worry. तो आपके सामने एक चुनौती है, एक चैलेंज है. You have a problem in front of you. What is your orientation towards that problem? And a negative orientation means, I don't know what this is about. I cannot deal with it. And a non-negative orientation means, here is my social circle. Here are my resources. Let me speak to so-and-so. Let me get this clarity. Here is my network. If you don't have this non-negative orientation, then your uncertainty shifts into worry. And further, it structures the issue that stress does not necessarily affect children or adults in the same way. Some people are more reactive to stress, and more importantly, may react more negatively than others to stress, resulting from much of the uncertainty. तो एक जगह stress है, चाहे pandemic as a larger universal stress, or stress because a family member is infected, you're infected, stress that you're infected, you're in quarantine, you're monitoring your oxygen levels, you don't know whether you stress because someone in the extended family has unfortunately passed away. And how are you appraising the stress? What kind of social support do you have? Given the resources you have at hand, what is the level of predictability that you have over your circumstances? And aapka basic temperament kaisa hai? It is a combination of this that leads some people to react more negatively to stress resulting from uncertainty than others. So right now, the pandemic is a universal experience, and many of us present here in this session today have directly or indirectly, personally or in the extended family experienced this. How does this get compounded? And what has happened, particularly where children is concerned, is that there is loss of routine, loss of predictability, loss of control, loss of learning context, loss of peer interaction, loss of social spaces, and loss of play. In order to mitigate the compounding effect of uncertainty, you create rituals where you reinstate routine, allow for predictability, give family members some decision-making powers, create joyous systems of learning, introduce play at home. Even if it is on social media, keep extended family interaction going, and keep in touch with social spaces virtually. And your uncertainty comes down. Some final thoughts, and this is the most wonderful piece from the Center for Informed Futures, the University of Auckland, where they speak about social cohesion in a post-COVID world. जब भी COVID खत्म होगा, इसकी समाप्ति जब भी होगी, how do we envision that? And what Heoranga Hua says in this monograph is that once social cohesion is lost, it becomes exceedingly difficult to restore, especially when there's both increased uncertainty and new forms of inequality. Let's not forget, friends, that pandemics of the nature of COVID have a disproportionate impact on vulnerable populations, daily wage workers, migrant workers. And there are shadow pandemics that have started. Poverty, children's issues, and this whole uncertainty. These are shadow pandemics. Now, social cohesion, my submission to you, should be the cornerstone of this new scaffolding, because what has COVID done? COVID has ruptured our existing world. So if we move to respond to our altered ecology, both our external ecology and our internal ecology in the minds, it calls for resets. And the reset has to be, and the word rupture is deliberate because it signals an inflection point where both opportunities and risks multiply. So how do you do this reset? The reset is done in these 5 ways. And indeed, Thursday Musings is a wonderful example of how you create a sense of belonging to a wider community, of trust, of common respect, of our civic needs. And this is why these kind of meetings and these kind of dialogues and discussions are so essential. And how do we create more and more such networks of belonging? Inclusion, which involves equity of opportunities and of outcomes. चाहे वो labor market participation हो, income हो, education हो, health हो, housing हो, what is happening to the market spaces? You know, आपका भाजी वाला जो है, how are their lives? And what are we doing in our small ways? Those of us who are not in lockdown, yeah, Bangalore is in lockdown right now, up to 12th, perhaps it may be extended, but we have a margin from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning where we go shopping to our local bazaar, local heart, हम लोग जाते हैं. उनकी जिंदगी कैसे है? And, you know, do we look at the lives of these people to look at what is the best way in which we can create an equity of opportunities? How do we create participation in social activities and community groups in our little gated communities, in our mohalla, even if it is virtual? How do we recognize and value diversity? खास करके जो marginalized populations हैं, and the legitimacy in public institutions that act to protect the rights and interests and to mediate conflicts. These are the 5 principles of social cohesion. And if you actually look at the UN policy brief on COVID-19 and the need for action on mental health, this was on 13th of May last year. This May, it'll be exactly 1 year when the Lancet Commission on Global Mental Health, you know, quoted this. And they said that mental health problems are on a continuum from mild and time-limited distress to severe mental health conditions. And the COVID-19 pandemic influences where are situated on that continuum. Now, what has happened is that the pandemic has actually generated multiple stresses. Those who had few experiences of anxiety and distress may have an increased number in this. And some may have developed mental health conditions, or those who previously had a mental health condition may experience a worsening of their condition and reduced functioning. So during the COVID-19 emergency, this whole uncertainty that we are talking about, आखिर डर क्या है? इन्फेक्शन का डर है, मृत्यु के बारे में भय है कि फैमिली मेंबर्स हम खो जाएंगे. For many people, it's about livelihoods, it's about being socially isolated, about separation. But for vulnerable population, it's also about increased risks of domestic violence and abuse and uncertainty about the future. School कब खुलेगा, college कब खुलेगा, exit exams कब होंगी, engineering मिलेगा कि नहीं, will we have a gap year? And, you know, these are the kind of uncertainties that people are dealing with that. And the only way that can be addressed is by conversations. And this is why if you really want to examine the long-term impact of the crisis on people's mental health and in turn the mental health impact on society. 2008 में जब economic crisis हुआ था, you know, what was called as the deaths of despair in working age Americans. and the risk of self-harm and substance use related mortality. They were linked to loss of hope because unemployment, rising equality. और जैसे COVID-19 की उसके आर्थिक बोझ जो है, the economic burden rises, is going to take a toll on people's mental health and major impact on families and wider society, which means that little actions, choti हमारी reaching out and touching people's life is what restores hope in people. And we call this solidarity. मैं देख रहा हूं कि डॉक्टर श्रीनिवास मूर्ति भी इस सत्र में शामिल हैं. Many years ago, during the Bhopal gas disaster and also after the Gujarat earthquake, I often recall many conversations with him, where we spoke about the spectrum of public mental health interventions in situations of disaster. That at one level, you're there to do depth therapy for people with severe PTSD and all that. At a second level, counseling interventions for people with anxiety and so on. At a third level, to meet the developmental needs of human beings, of children. At a fourth level, to structure their lives and structure that routine. But at a fifth level, your presence there is to express solidarity. Because the positive observations on solidarity may not endure if people lose hope and become intolerant to physical distancing measures. But the experience is that all communities have helpful embedded resources that need to be supported. Chahe wo sarkari ho ya gair sarkari. And it's important now more than ever to activate and support these local support, especially for marginalized people, and encourage a spirit of community self-help to protect and promote mental health being. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. I think it's been a real food for thought. We've really dwelled into the subject. And before I hand it over for the questions, I'd just like to reiterate some of the important points that you've mentioned so that those people who are with us, whatever queries they have, whatever they would like to discuss, they can put that in. Well, you said that Corona is not going away soon. It's going to take now, some years now. And unpredictability is part of life. The sophist you mentioned, the Socrates mentioned, then Bertrand Russell, Aristotle, Briggs, Buddha's search, and the Buddha's search for enlightenment, you said 6 BC, and very right you are, very few people, moved around, and his quest for enlightenment was really, that is why he set up a phenomenal religion. And finally, you said there are different kinds of people. There are different types of existence. You mentioned about the Heisenberg's principle, the variety of uncertainty. You also mentioned the unified protocol for the transdiagnostic treatment of emotional disorders. One very important concept that you mentioned was the possibility, the probability, and the appraisal and the temperaments, how they get involved in the negative problem orientation. Finally, what you said in your very clear and very succinct lecture was, you have to reinstate the life routine. You have to restore social cohesion because the impact is disproportionate. It's not affecting everybody in the same way. The 5 elements you said to restore certainty and to bring us out of this crisis is a sense of belonging, inclusion, participation, recognition, and finally legitimacy of the institution. So with so many multiple stressors being generated, I'm quite sure with such an exhaustive lecture, I'm quite sure that people are there with a lot of questions, and Dr. Amrit is ready with all the questions. Over to Dr. Amrit for the question and answer session. Thank you very much, Dr. Shekhar. Wonderful lecture, wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Alim is always ready with the questions. Amrit is just a clapper boy. So there's a good. I'll start with the question that Dr. T. Sudhir has asked, and it's a very pertinent question. Now that a group of psychiatrists had come out with a letter, open letter, which we read in the, everywhere it was being flashed, that media guidelines for the reporting of what has happened. So there's a question by Dr. T. Sudhir, which is very, very pertinent. There are media guidelines for suicide reporting. Shouldn't there be a similar guideline for media reporting during this pandemic? A major contributing factor for increasing the anxiety and fear might be the seeing of, hundreds of cremations going on, the lines in front of hospitals, people gasping for oxygen, and whatnot. So should the media play that everything is all good, or should the media come out with what are the facts? Where and who decides where the lines are drawn actually? Dr. Seshadri.
Yeah, Amrit, thank you, Sudhir, very much for, as Amrit pointed out, this letter was actually jointly signed by Dr. B.N. Gangadhar, Dr. Pratima Murthy, Dr. Gautam Saha, and Dr. Rajesh Sagar. And it is available in public domain. I think Amrit would be happy to send it across that. Perhaps the IPS media wing should consider taking aspects of the letter and but the issue is COVID has become such an international event, shall we say, that there are guidelines that are coming about responsible reportage. But every time we report, there is a new twist and a new turn that is taking place. And maintaining the balance often becomes kind of difficult. But I think that public letter that was put out kind of succinctly put what kind of media approaches and some ideas about how the media could, actually, which aspects should be reported and how, so that it creates, at least to some extent, a sense of ease in the kind of people who it seeks to address.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have a very basic question. How do I tolerate this uncertainty?
As I pointed out, uncertainty has certain contexts. It is not an amorphous experience. It has a context and it has certain thought processes that it is this aspect that that I'm uncertain about that. And when we look at creating structures of clarification, creating structures of support, and we also balance our experience of uncertainty by actually reaching out and touching the lives of people who perhaps do not have the bandwidth because they are dealing with something immediate, that it sort of balances the impact that our own experience of uncertainty has. Not that it goes away, but it's pretty much similar to a basic principle of chemistry of that if you put a molecule of gas in a fixed container, it expands to fill that container. But if you put a molecule of another gas, the relative space that it occupies becomes less. So when you put in your consciousness many other aspects of thought processes or experiences and other things that you do, it's not that the experience of uncertainty goes away, but its relative impact reduces. And then you do something directly to address the uncertainty itself. So that's how I would approach it, Dr. Alim.
Dr. Alim, I'll just take the question from here. Sir, we had the IPL which was going around. So, one newspaper took a stand that we will not report anything about the IPL. We will share stories about people who are doing good. There's a lot of hue and cry. How can cricketers play? It was a very sad state, because we have cricketers who have their family members who are also suffering. And I think that was a 4-hour distraction for many, it's not just cricketers, a lot of, I see kids also watching, people looking for Dhoni to come out, Virat Kohli, somebody is looking at Kane Williamson. And then suddenly everybody was clamoring that IPL should be stopped, IPL should be stopped. So actually we were having 4 hours of distraction. Like you told, our conscious effort was more on the cricket or something which was away from the death, the havoc that was being played around. So we just cannot understand the mentality of people here. We get something which we can just, like people have been asking, sometimes it's just few minutes of solace without even a single mention of the word COVID. So such events, are they important or are they not important in these type of, situation?
Amrit, it's a matter of balance. Let me tell you two scenarios. Sometimes what happens is that इतनी बड़ी महामारी है, इतना बड़ा विषय दुनिया में चल रहा है, और आप लोग खेल रहे हैं. So there is a tendency, therefore, to be judgmental. That, on the other hand, whether it is a pandemic or whether it is a country that goes to long strife due to extended internal warfare or extended, what suffers are the social sciences and the arts and the aesthetics. That, so the point is, does one stop living life and deriving pleasure from the possibilities of life? This is not to say become callous or become insensitive to the suffering around you. But this is also not to say that you need to become paralyzed and to be constantly thinking of one particular. So this balance is often difficult to. And I think that maintaining, in a situation like this, maintaining one's meditative mindfulness practices, maintaining one's silence, maintaining one's connection with extended family, maintaining one's hobbies, whether they are writing or whether they are singing or whether they are drawing, and maintaining your social obligations and tasks and responsibilities creates that balance. The relative valence may differ, how much of, so one is not saying that you're spending 23 hours of the day in self-indulgent entertainment and you're hardly looking at, so there is that extreme. On the other hand, there are COVID warriors, who are living, breathing, and dying in the situation that, so there are these kind of, so the choice that one makes about what defines my sense of connection with this unusual time in humanity and mankind, which none of us have experienced that. And we have to find a path and a balance that is comforting to our sense of personal ethic. So there is nothing wrong in finding soothing activities for ourselves. And so it's a question of maintaining that balance. And it's also a question of time that, somebody said, I have to explain things to, how do I explain to people that, and how do I convey bad news, and how do I talk, and so all these are processes, and the word process and processes is exceedingly important. हम तीन चीजों को हमेशा कहते हैं, क्रिया, प्रक्रिया और प्रतिक्रिया. हमारी जितनी भी प्रक्रियाएं अगर वो हमारी जितनी भी प्रतिक्रियाएं हैं वो अगर प्रक्रियात्मक हो, if our responses are process based, so if we are trying to explain to a family member, we explain the realities. ये situation है, ये कर रहे हैं, यहाँ इतना available है. So it's not that you give them telegraphic information, no information, or you're overwhelming them with too much of information that doesn't make sense. So how do you make that balance? So somebody said, I'm a third year PG, and I don't know that. I'm always reminded of what Emily Dickinson said, and I never lose an opportunity to, when about breaking bad news. In fact, we are going to be starting a series on COVID very soon, and I'm going to take the opportunity actually, to put on chat some of our links, and we're going to be starting this pretty soon. So what Emily Dickinson says is, tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies too bright for our infirm delight. The truth's superb surprise as lightning to the children eased with explanation kind. The truth must dazzle gradually, else every man be blind. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies too bright for our infirm delight. The truth's superb surprise as lightning to the children eased with explanation kind. The truth must dazzle gradually, else every man be blind. संपूर्ण सच बोलो, लेकिन थोड़ा तिरछा बोलो, क्योंकि सच, so that's how our approach and how we orient ourselves needs to be, really calibrated. Again, Amrit, Alim Tufan, I see that there are so many comments and so many questions, and I would be happy. I would be happy for you to save all this and send it to me. And as always, I'm happy to subject it to my analysis.
We'll take few questions, sir. We'll take fast some questions. Chalim. Sharda has a question. She's one of our persons who is behind this show. So I'll take her question, Alim, then you can take the other questions.
Sure.
So many parents during this time are more worried about education of the children rather than the emotional needs. What should be our approach? I think a question answered, there's an answer in a question, but then your take on it, sir.
It's very interesting, Amrit, that this question has come up. I would like to draw your attention to a program called Mano Darpan, which is hosted by NCERT. And I had done a session for them in March. Please do check out NCERT Mano Darpan on YouTube. तो उसमें education को लेके मैंने 2-3 संक्षिप्त में बातें कही थी. COVID notwithstanding, COVID को तो छोड़िए, I said I had written a newspaper piece once where I said, rejoice, it's examination time. Funny, isn't it? Nobody ever thought of examinations as a joyous experience. There's always a sense of doom, disaster, and finality around it. Whereas examinations should actually be a celebration of learning. And it never is, because you create this tension about. So process is trivialized over outcome. Effort is trivialized over performance. So there's no joy in learning. And Professor Yashpal, many years ago, when he brought out a document called Learning Without Burden, he called this as the tyranny of rote learning. And I add to that the tyranny of expectations. Schools must be joyous spaces. Education must be a joyous experience. And this is where, if you look at it in the context of the National Education Policy 2020, now NEP 2020 is a very complex document to navigate. But Sankshipt mein they have said, let people take gap years. We want to build skills for citizenship. And there indeed lies the purpose of education. It's not about numeracy and literacy. It's not about livelihood and entrance exam and INI CET, which has been postponed. And all of that is all right. I'm not taking away from the importance of that. Somebody said the true purpose of education is to help children learn how to learn. But I say to you that the true purpose of education is the development of an egalitarian personhood, एक समान अधिकारी व्यक्तित्व का विकास, the development of a socially responsive and responsible citizen, नागरिकता जो जागृत है, and the development of an identity that is imbued with aesthetic sensibility, kala, kalpana, sangeet, rangmanch, prakriti, rishte, pyar, vatsalya. All the rest is only superstructure. Children are hardwired, to. So I think we need to re-image, and what the word I refer to as reset. A reset is required now. वो जैसे गाड़ी में होता है ना, वो स्पीडोमीटर में वो एक बटन दबाओ तो वो रीसेट हो जाता है जीरो में to start. We have to make a lot of resets in our lives, and it can be done easily. That's the point I'm making. Over to you, Amrit.
Sir, this reset, I think reset, easy for maybe you, maybe us, but what should we advise the general public? Reset is very difficult for them. Hitting the reset button is the most difficult task, because they are wanting oxygen cylinders, they are wanting injections, they are wanting admission. So let me put in this perspective to the audience that we are not dealing with those things. As a mental health professional, I'd like you to suggest a few very simple tips. जैसे आपने बताया कि social circle को आप enable करें, enrich करें. How do you react or respond to the situation? You identify your own personality traits and then respond. So, sir, on these lines, for people in general who are not mental health professionals, एकदम सरल भाषा में समझाएं कि हम क्या करें कि हमारा थोड़ा सुधार हो और हमारे आसपास जो कांटेक्ट में लोग हैं उसमें थोड़ा सा हम हेल्प कर सकें.
Janab, let me address this from a point that actually Rupik has raised on chat also, कि जो लोग जैसे डॉक्टर वगैरह हैं, हेल्थ प्रोफेशनल्स जो कोविड वार्ड्स में वगैरह काम कर रहे हैं, and उनकी परिस्थिति क्या है, and what are they supposed to reset, and you have spoken about the lives of the average man out there, जिसको हम आम आदमी या आवाम जिनको हम कहते हैं, that what is the kind of reset, and even before COVID, the world order is such is that the what is called as the two societies, the very divisive, that the super rich and and the really poor, and this larger central middle class and all that, and it's all fine to say talk about reset, but what is the possible reset that for an average man out there? Dr. Halim, there is a systemic way, and one can talk about scale. कि अगर आप स्केल में नहीं करेंगे तो फिर बात करने का फायदा क्या है, because we are a country of 1.4 billion. So you talk to scale that, and I have often found that जो लोग स्केल की बात करते हैं और उस पे वाद विवाद चर्चा भिन्न अभिप्राय and debate and ad nauseum, they basically end up doing nothing. और जो लोग स्केल की बात नहीं करते हैं, and they said कि हम आम आदमी की रीसेट जो है वो हम छोटे छोटे चीजों पे करेंगे, starting with the lady who comes to clean my house and my cook and that boy who washes my car, and I will do whatever assistance. So if that lady is other than my house working in 3 other houses, and that one person who was positive in that house did not bother to tell her that one of them was positive and allowed her to come and get exposed, and then the society came to know and they quarantined, and who will do the rapid antigen and if necessary the RT-PCR for this person? For her anxiety, which is at a level to get reset, and I think that there are people looking after me. So I take her to my hospital, get the rapid antigen done and assure her, and said that because you've been exposed, don't come for work. Rather than saying कि आप मास्क पहनिए, मैं मास्क पहनता हूं, मेरे घर में है, मेरा काम कीजिए. No cutting of pay. That, see what has happened to people, that people in the first wave, daily wage workers were not allowed inside, and then when they came for the salary, they were not allowed inside. That how are they supposed to that? So the resets occur exactly as the University of Auckland said. It occurs by social cohesion. तो ये वही बात है जनाब आलिम, जो ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट के जमाने में साथी हाथ बढ़ाना, साथी रे साथी हाथ बढ़ा, एक अकेला रह जाए तो ये समय आ गया है हाथ बढ़ाने.
ये नया दौर था, ये अभी भी वो नया दौर आ गया.
Sir was talking about naya daur. Last year when we had the lockdown shutdown, we had a lot of TikToks, dance videos, people cooking, sharing, coffee time, everybody showing their talent, their passion, their interest. We saw a lot of, but this wave, the second wave, has been more devastating. We are not seeing. Absolutely. So there has been a change in the way people have reacted. What is the, how do we deal with this second wave actually in terms of the I am pretty sure that the mental health issues arising out of the second wave will be devastating, sir.
Preparation nahi tha, Amrit. Preparation nahi tha. There was complacency, and what happened was super spreading events started, and and this is why we have to be very careful about education and opening of schools in order to prepare for the third wave, because children are going to be affected. This is not the time to open schools. They are super spreading events that. So people became complacent, what was good about the first wave was that we were in a contained environment. The whole country was in a lockdown. Then phase-wise jab khula, so people became complacent. Mask utar gaye, party shati shuru ho gayi, balle balle ho gaya. And then the mutation started, travel started that. So we know this, the pandemic that Shobit spoke about in his intro, Spanish, we know this, yeah. 100 saal pehle yahi to hua tha. And we have not learned. There is no better public health approach, as my colleague and teacher, Dr. V. Ravi, who retired as senior professor of virology, says, there is no better public health approach than common sense. And there is no better vaccine than the mask. That. So I think it's a question of preparation. See, this will be tided over as every virus is. It will take its toll, as every disaster does, that it takes its toll. But I think that we need to, understand this and get into a preparation to tide over, so that the October-November wave, we are prepared in advance. May it be known that on 6th of May, I have stated this on this public forum and spread the word around that all those who work with children, and because, but the symptoms will be more GI. This is because we are already seeing it in the second wave. So let's recognize this and prepare for it, so that we don't have super spreading events. And if we practice this basic public health thing, we'll be able to tide it over.
So there is an important question regarding the same in the chat box. COVID appropriate behavior in children. So how do we teach the children? Because they might not understand the restrictions, and we might be provoking more of anxiety in them by telling them the truth. So what is the approach?
We follow the basic, we keep it simple. In fact, Ministry of Health ने जब छोटी-छोटी videos पहले निकाली थी, तो करीब 1-2 minute का I had done a piece. Then it's probably time to revive that piece again. Where it's about basic hygiene और public health की जब हम बात करते हैं, जैसे बाहर जाके आते हैं, क्यों हम लोग हाथ पैर धोते हैं, या कोई डस्टिंग वस्टिंग किया उसके बाद why do we wash up, that why do we brush our teeth, that, and so it's just that when there's a dust storm, why do we cover, and sometimes dust storm are there for a moment and they go away, but sometimes they last for a little longer. Or if you're in a desert area जहाँ रेत वगैरह है और जहाँ हवा काफी उड़ती है, हम लोग ढक के जाते हैं ना, ताकि हम लोग जो उड़ती हुई मिट्टी को सूंघे नहीं. बस मामला कुछ ऐसा ही है. तो कुछ दिन के लिए if we practice all this, it will be useful. So we keep it simple, and that's the kind of approach that we use. That as we are approaching towards the end of this program, may I request the organizers again to save all the stuff on chat, and except for the unable to hear anything, and thank you. Did Dr. Shekhar train how to speak, or does he know how to speak?
It is God gifted, let me tell you. It is God gifted, let me tell you.
And my lovely and good friend, Dr. Suresh Kota, who's always been such a good friend and always so positive, says, "Nahi, hamesha acha bolta tha."
Sir, one question if you can take. We have been discussing a lot about the national education policy and all. Yep. But what about the uncertainty in the exams? Why is the government or maybe the advisors not giving a concrete or a clear-cut direction? Okay, the next 6 months you're not going to have exam. Like NEET. NEET was cancelled 2 days before, or 1 day, 2 days before it was supposed to be held. That is almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Let us look at the mental health aspect of the doctors who are going to be a frontline people. They don't know when it is going to be held. Why the exams is going to be held after August 31st? Children, 10th class board exams, 12th class board exams. Why can't people say and tell, let they be postponed for 6 months or a year? Let us err on the side of caution. Why this uncertainty? Aren't we creating this uncertainty in our children, all of us?
Well, yeah, those decisions, Amrit, are being taken slowly. For example, in many states, it's already been announced that the first PU people are going to be promoted to second PU without any exams. That because education is a state subject other than central boards and collegiate education and all of that. But as we speak, many of these decisions are being taken. Our systems of governance are quite complex, Amrit, and many decisions go through various bodies and various ratifying bodies and so on. I think that people are trying to fast track many of this and kind of make the balance. So yes, these decisions are being made and they are being put out in many states and from many central boards. But so that would be my response. I also wanted to say that I've been told by Fabian that the IPS task force for COVID mental health is meeting tomorrow along with the IPS disaster management task force and the IPS media task force at 8 a.m. tomorrow on media matters and mental health. It's called the good, bad and the ugly. So a lot of stuff. Thanks, Fabian, for that. So we will be, hopefully we would have some kind of stuff on that.
Dr. Roop Sidana wanted 1 minute, sir. He's a senior psychiatrist, sir. Dr. Roop,
I think Dr. Shekhar Seshadri has already told the IPS task force on COVID-19 and the IPS task force on disaster management, along with the media and mental health subcommittee of IPS. We are all getting together to have a webinar tomorrow at 8 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook Live. And we would invite all these people to join us, and we can get some of the answers that media guidelines or media and mental health. We will have a person from the media, and we have invited other people from media to join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. So my personal invitation to all, and to Seshadri, whenever I listen to him, it seems it's a musical discourse rather than a talk or a lecture. It's always so soothing and pleasurable to listen to you, Dr. Shekhar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rup sir. Thank you, Rup sir. And sir, congrats, Tufan sir. We are able to promote other events as well. So congratulations to you also.
Thank you.
Alim, we have an interesting question from Dr. Munda. If you can take it.
Sure.
Amrit, go ahead.
Sir,
So many
we always look for certainty in our lives. So is there a direct relationship between our need for certainty and our intolerance of uncertainty?
Yes. You know, they are sort of, shall we say, two sides of the same coin, that everybody, you know, उम्मीद होती है ना खुशहाली की, राशि पैसे भी आएंगे, अच्छा पार्टनर भी मिलेगा, और you know स्वास्थ्य भी अच्छा रहेगा. You know, it's like a doctor thinking कि the patient must come and give his symptoms unambiguously. A diagnosis must be easily available. There must be easy medicine. He should take the medicine without asking too many questions. He should improve immediately, and he should be ever grateful for what I did, and pay the necessary money to my receptionist. If medicine was so simple, it's never so simple, you know, because complications occur. That so yes, there are two sides of the same coin, and the more intense our need for certainty and the more intolerance we have for that combination is like, you know, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, so to speak. And that's where many people have said on chat कि जीवन को हम अगर सरलता से जिएं, that we sometimes complicate our lives, that, you know, and the simplicity of if we discover the simplicity of our lives as a child does in a discarded toffee wrapper. A discarded toffee wrapper is just a plaything for a child because it has texture, it has sound, and it takes flight when you throw it. और क्या चाहिए? कीमती खिलौने थोड़ी चाहिए. That so तो सरल जीवन को अपनाएं, और सरलता से अगर हम जीवन को जिए तो जीवन की चुनौतियां और जटिलताएं जो हैं उससे हम जूझ सकते हैं.
Correct.
And sir, just let me just add, Shekhar sir has kindly agreed to be with us again on 20th.
20th.
So on that day, we'll talk about many questions in the chat box that were there about grief and loss. If you have lost a relative, if you have lost a family member, what to do? Parents, children have lost their parents. So we'd like to promote our own event also here.
And how to talk to somebody who has lost somebody who's close to us.
Right.
Maybe a kid who comes with. So that's what we've been discussing, Dr. Shekhar. With this pandemic is actually taken a lot of young people with it, and the next wave will hit us harder. So let us be prepared emotionally.
Yeah. Sir, regarding this acceptance of eventuality, acceptance of the conditions, इसके बारे में आपकी क्या राय है कि अब जो है सब हो गया, हमारे हाथ में कुछ नहीं है. So this acceptance approaches the good and bad of it.
Mindfulness based and acceptance based therapy is part of this whole new wave CBT. One must understand that there is a difference between nuanced or empowered acceptance versus a resigned. It's a question of how the narrative is structured in the mind. कि कर भी क्या सकते हैं, अपनाना तो पड़ेगा, कोई मजबूरी है, as opposed to saying कि ये रीत है और चुनौतियां हैं, और इसे मैं अपना लूं तो it's better for me, it's better for my mental health. That so there are many kinds of acceptance. That so is it a resigned hopeless acceptance, or is it a more informed and a nuanced and an empowered acceptance? And that's where the therapeutic approach is to shift someone from this position of resignation makes. So I will hand it over to you now to close the session.
So one last statement Dr. Ruma has said, I am certain at last it's not difficult to fall in love. With this, I hand it over to the chairperson, sir.
Chairperson, sir.
Yeah, I think, what can I say? I think the time, we have so many more questions. It has been right from acceptance, mindfulness, and I think that I'd like to especially, not just, I'd like to thank the speaker, but I'd like to thank all the people who have given their very, very important inputs, their queries, their curiosities. Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Tofan Patik.
Dr. Shobit.
Yes, sir. I would like to just, sir, from the fantastic deliberation which Dr. Seshadri sir has given, that I would like to call this virus as a piece of bad news wrapped in a protein. Pushing a scientific committee into an uncertainty and throwing a lot of scientific shadow pandemics, most common being women and children. So we have to fight this with this complex humanitarian crisis with a lot of solidarity. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would like to hand over the moderator to Tufan.
Dr. Tufan, sir. Dr. Tufan, sir.
Thank you, everybody. So, because all of us are living through this pandemic, or I've got a personal reflection. I will take 2 minutes to have my reflections, and I will refer to the comments made by Dr. Shobit Garg in respect of Spanish flu 1918. I do believe, and it is a fact, then the condition was more gloomy. 500 million people at that point of time, which was 1/3 of the world's population, were affected. Around 58 million people expired. And that too, in the background, this pandemic started in February 1918, and the World War I ended in November 1918. All these days, people are suffering and facing both the catastrophes, and still the war did not end. One has to be positive. And now what is complicating, or what is adding to the problem or adding to the solutions also, is information overload. Maybe at that point of time, general people did not know that so many people are dying in America, so many people are dying in Brazil, and this can be the result. Tomorrow you may be there. And they were being laid on the London streets. There, I have seen a movie long back on this 19 Spanish flu. I don't remember. The theme is that the soldiers are returning to London to find this in a bad state after the war, because the flu was there up to 1920. So this information overload is also making confusion and adding to the mental stress. It is not only enlightening, it is not educating. Simultaneously, it is ending in confusion. Quoted documents having some reference to somewhere are telling diverse things, and general public are getting that through the social media group. And every day I am getting minimum 15, 16 calls. Kya hai baat? What is the thing? But I do believe we have to have some positivity. The world is not bleaker in compared to 1980. 1/3 of the world's population are not yet affected. And all the virus attacks that has been there, which have been a challenge for the mankind, have taken their course. It will take its toll. The third wave will come. Spanish flu had 4 waves. The 4th wave may come. But we have to be positive, and we have to move in the right direction. It is good. We are having information technology to inform us, but it should not be utilized in an adverse way. And what was raised by Abri about some guidelines for the mass media to convey to the people, as well as to control the social media has to be there so that people do not become frightened. This is my view. With this view, I compliment Dr. Seshadri, and we will have, maybe we need 2 more sessions, one on grief and the other to deal with the chat box questions. With a lot of thanks to Dr. Seshadri, if you want, you can comment on my views, otherwise we'll see it in the next time. And
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Amrit,
I have a question. I'll take one question, sir. Sir, Dr. Sanghamitra Pati is here. She is the head of ICMR of Odisha, sir. She leads the, all the COVID challenges and all. And basically because it's done by the Odisha Psychiatric Society, and she helps, she works a lot with our psychiatrists. This was a question, sir, and I would just request you to hear the question. Maybe you can address it in the next session. So greetings, I'm Sanghamitra Pati from ICMR. She heads the ICMR here. How do we address pandemic fatigue and resilience building in such surging waves of pandemic? How can psychiatrists guide the policymakers and public?
I don't know whether pandemic fatigue and resilience building in healthcare providers or in general public or those who are positive. I'm presuming she's talking about healthcare providers.
Right.
And so there is a different method to deal with. This is what hospital administrations and health administrators do. So that's why we have duty rosters, and and anyone who works in emergency, there is a protocol that any emergency worker has to mandatory go on what is called as R&R, rest and relaxation. They'll say, no, I want to work. And they say, no, go off for 1 week. No phone calls, come back after 1 week. So there are many such things that really help, and this is the rule in most international agencies that work with Baki psychiatrists guiding policymakers and public. You'd be interested to know that SAMVAD, the project that I'm running on child protection and mental health, works in 4 verticals: mental health, care and protection, education, and policy and law. Is the first time in the history of NIMHANS and in the history of psychiatry that a project in a mainstream hospital has a vertical on policy and law. So, and I know that IPS has a section that, and IPS has in the past worked on policy and law issues. They did it in the context of the Mental Health Act. They did it in the context of suicide, which was punishable by offense later. They did it for Section 377 on sexuality minorities. So IPS has a track record of working on issues of policy and law.
Thank you, sir. So with this, we come to an end to the Thursday Musings 41st edition. I would like to compliment Dr. Seshadri with a comment I got in the personal chat box. What it ended, I was so lost. The way he talks, you just want him to keep going on and on. His voice though. So that was the comment I just wanted to end your talk with, sir. Thank you so much. Lovely, wonderful. If somebody asks me who's your favorite speaker, no hostages taken. You are it, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, sir. People, we love your accent, sir. The way you speak, people have been asking me, sir, ko kya America se laya hai? Bole, nahi, he's our own Indian thoroughbred man. So thank you.
No, I was actually brought up in US. I was in US for 8 years. That's
so
why.
now, Alim was having a complex. We belong to the same place. We eat the same food. How can sir speak so well? So thank you so much, sir.
Alim is wonderful. Alim is wonderful. Thank you.
Shobhit, you created a new wave, the Spanish wave. The only Spanish wave I heard was Barcelona, Messi, and Madrid. So wonderful having you, a dear friend. Shobhit is a wonderful man. Thank you, Tofan sir, for encouraging everyone. IPS Odisha State Branch, Alim, our backroom, Sharda, Sazia, and Rucha, Torrent, and a whole bunch of supporters, viewers who egg us on, who give us ideas, who just don't let our guards down. Thank you so much. So we wanted to end the session with a very, it's a request by many of the viewers who did not put it on the chat box, because tomorrow, the Bombay Psychiatric Society is doing something for, but everybody wanted Dr. Shekhar Seshadri to sing a small song for 3 minutes. Sir. There's a small request from everybody. 2 मिनट का एक गाना सर से सुनेंगे और खत्म करेंगे सर आज का सेशन, इफ यू डोंट माइंड सर. सॉरी.
No, मैं तो हमेशा एक ही गाना गाता हूँ, which is about how we can create new memories for children, even the COVID, so that 5 years or 10 years from now, they remember. So that's.
सर एक अच्छा गाना है, एक some the rocking type, not the serious type. So we have had 2 minutes and we'll close it.
जोश वाला सर, जोश.
जोश वाला सर, एक मजा आएगा. Everybody is down sir. The shoulders are drooping. Everybody is down sir. We want something to pep us up and then we can have a good dinner.
हिंदी में या अंग्रेजी में?
दोनों में एक सर हो जाएगा. We don't. Why will we disappoint anyone?
Anything you prefer.
We can have both sir. We can have both sir. 5 minutes won't change as much. दोनों का सर, एक हिंदी एक इंग्लिश.
दिल का हाल सुने दिल वाला, दिल का हाल सुने दिल वाला, सीधी सी बात न मिर्ची मसाला, कहने वाला, दिल का हाल सुने दिल वाला. चलिए.
Thank you sir. Thank you sir. Thank you so much sir.
All right.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
See you
Good
soon.
night.
Night.
Good night, sir. Good night.
Good night sir. Good night.
Good night.
Nice having all of you. Have a safe weekend.